Hey everybody, this is JDGaming back today with a special episode of Get Better at Yu-Gi-Oh! So, if you were paying attention online the last couple of days, you'd see that the new Forbidden and Limited list has been released, and so we need to make some changes to our decks. So, instead of the deck profile that I was going to do today, we're actually going to go over my thought process as to what exactly do I do when I need to make adjustments for a new list. How do I tell if my deck is still playable or not? All that type of stuff. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. So the first thing obviously you have to do when the new list is released is take all of your cards, whether it's your dins or your decks, and basically pull out everything that's no longer allowed in the quantities that you have them. Over here you can see this is the Duelist toolkit that I have that I've featured in another video. Pretty much what I like to do is I just like storing all the cards that I might use for decks based on like Monster Spell Trap, siding Monster Spell Trap, and then extra. Again, this is just my system, but pretty much this is how I like to organize my cards. You probably have your own way, and what you have to do is go through all of these and look for all the cards that you can no longer use. Same thing with the deck or decks that you may be running already. So, for example, we'll have to take out all of our copies of Kaiser Coliseum because that card is forbidden. If you're playing Burning Abyss or anything teching Dante with Beatrice, you'll probably have to cut down Beatrice down to 1 because, you know, if you're going to play seriously, you gotta follow that list and go back down to 1. I had to pull out the teleport in Psychic so that I only have 1 left, which is unfortunate, but you know, there's the same thing there. Monarch Stormforth down to 1, Maxi down to 2, which is a bit unfortunate because this is the main reason why I can't do the profile right now. It's because I have to fix that slot there. But also, having the toolkit, I guess, shameless plug for something that I'm not even making money off of or anything. The reason I like the idea of the toolkit is I also like collecting cards so that I have triplicates of everything, playsets if you will. So the point of that is whenever a new list drops, cards like Allure of Darkness, I'll already have 3 copies of because I picked them up to make sure that I have them in case the list changes. And you can't obviously pick up everything, but what I tend to do is, like, if Allure went from 1 to 2 last format, it makes sense that it could go to 1 or 3, so there's no harm in picking up 1 when it's at a dip in its price point. So, you know, it might save you money in the long run. But pretty much first step is going to be adjust to the new list, as you probably already know. Once you've pulled out all the cards that the ban list tells you you must remove, the next step is to go and evaluate the deck you have to see if the core still functions as you had designed. So if you look at Burning Abyss, PK Fire, whatever variant you want, Beatrice is a very powerful card that allows you to play a control game with that strategy, and it gives you a lot of resilience because if your opponent tries to take out your Beatrice, you get a replacement for it anyway, and you can respond to your opponent pretty much before they can do anything, which makes it an extremely difficult card to deal with. However, limiting Beatrice may make it difficult for your Burning Abyss strategy to play a control game, but they didn't touch Dante at all. If you think of the Burning Abyss core, the whole function is to go get a bunch of free monsters on the board, get your Dante or Dantes, mill as many cards as possible to get free resources, and then use all those resources to then push for a big game-winning attack and just win in one turn. And if they can't win immediately, then they would go for Beatrice so that they can stall out the game as much as possible, control it so that they can push when they feel that they have that momentum in their favor. The thing is, all the Burning Abyss monsters only work once per turn anyway, so if you think of Seer going to 1, yes, it does prevent the deck from having that play as kind of a longevity play. It can't repetitively use Seer as freely as it once did. But the deck still has all of its abilities to summon multiple Dantes, mill everything, bring out the big board with Levier and all the PK monsters, and they can even still use the 1 Beatrice to push with Farfa or Alec as necessary. So realistically, on the surface, at least before any testing, just on paper, I would say Burning Abyss weren't really hit that hard because the core functioning of the deck remains intact. If you look at a deck like Cosmo, Teleport and Dark Destroyer have been limited, but if you look at Teleport, I mean, this card helps them get the pilots, but it's not like Cosmo's won or lost based on whether they drew Teleport. And in the case of Dark Destroyer, yeah, they may lose 2 copies, but they still have 1 Dark Destroyer, and now they can start replacing that with other cards like Dark Planet or anything else that's stamped Cosmo or anything generic the Cosmos may want to experiment with over the next few weeks. So if anything, it's just given a really powerful deck the freedom to kind of explore a little bit, see some new frontiers, and see if they can come up with something that makes their strategy even more potent than Dark Destroyer. I'm not saying that the deck won't be any weaker because of the list. Realistically, losing Dark Destroyer to 1 does hurt the deck as it is right now, but don't forget, decks don't have to be played in any one certain way. They can adapt, and in this case, I don't think Dark Destroyer is something that cripples the deck if it's only allowed at 1. If you look at Monarchs, however, this is a very different story in my opinion. They lost Ether the Heavenly Monarch to 1, and Monarch Storm 4th to 1, and Pantheism to 1. So Pantheism and Ether, I'd say, are very, very important, crucial cards for the deck's core functioning. You need to have enough Ethers in your deck just to summon in the first place, and Pantheism is something that gets your hands out of these really bad bricking hands and allows you to play the game when you otherwise couldn't. It fixes your hand and enables a lot of powerful plays, allows you to keep up. With both of those two core pieces gone, it may be challenging to fight with Monarchs now because the handicap created by the ban list makes it so that they have to fight an uphill battle against decks like these that haven't necessarily had their cores totally dismantled like Monarchs did. The point here is, yes, Monarchs have their core hit, so I wouldn't bank on using them for a big level competition. If you are a very serious player and your whole purpose in this game is to win as many big events as possible, there's no reason to handicap yourself with a deck that just got hit. However, many of you guys are casual players or don't necessarily aim to win every YCS or anything, and you just picked up Monarchs because you like the deck, or you picked it up because it's a structured deck so it's budget. Those reasons are still totally valid, and if you don't necessarily want to try to win the biggest events consistently every single time, you can still play this deck. You'll just have to keep that fact that the deck has gotten weaker in mind, adapt and innovate much like any of the other decks that lost anything, and then you may have to set your standards a bit differently as to what type of an event you can do well at. Basically, just don't have the expectation that, oh, no matter what the ban list does to my deck, I can always win. That's not necessarily the case. The reason these changes happen is to limit decks that are too powerful. But does it mean your deck is dead? Not necessarily. It all depends on your perspective and what you want to get out of playing that deck. So once you've taken a look at the core of your deck and decided that you do want to keep playing it despite the changes created by the list, it's time to think of how will my play environment change based on this list. So if you think about the big top tier metagames right now, you can pretty much expect that Monarchs may not be as popular a choice because of all the hits. I can't say for sure whether or not they will actually drop off the face of the earth or they'll continue being popular with some new adaptations, but for now, I'm not going to play as many things in the main deck, for instance, that would focus entirely on beating Monarchs, when, for instance, another deck like Blue Eyes would be more of a priority for me. So just go through, spend a few moments, think of the new themes that you've seen, things like Blue Eyes, things like Metal Foes, things that are available now, and then make an idea of what type of decks you would face. Just like before when we made the deck core, you want to make sure that your current deck that you want to adjust is still a viable strategy going forward versus the decks you expect. Once you decide that that is the case, you can go and start actually pulling cards from it. So this is the Brilliant Magical Reptiles deck that we've been working on over the last few weeks here on this channel. And the first step is, of course, just like before, just take out the cards that have been hit directly by the list. Obviously, I can't play the third copy of Max C anymore, and I have to think, okay, well, what did I lose from that? That's not part of the core. I basically lost a card that allows me to draw some extra cards while defending from the opponent by pressuring them into stopping their plays. So that's the type of thing I lost. I have to keep that in mind. I'm not planning on facing Monarchs as much game one, so I might still devote side deck slots, but there's no reason to play the main decked copies of Breaker anymore just to get rid of the domain lock. Until we see some results and we see, okay, if Monarchs are a big threat with domain, I could go and do that. Or if there's a new deck that uses a ton of floodgates, I could start off with Breaker. But for now, this is a tech card that we can remove. So now, I've basically gone through the rest of this deck and I thought, okay, the rest of this is pretty solid, I want to keep it as is. So I have 3 new slots that I can work with. So then, your next step is going to be go through all your available options, go through that toolkit that you have or whatever collection you like to organize, and see what types of things might you want to fill those slots with. In my case, I just lost some defenses, so I could consider some different trap hole cards that can fit along with the Rafflesia that I already run to fill in the gap that this one Max C left. Of course, losing Max C does hurt the deck in terms of being able to consistently stop the opponent, but at its core, I just lost a defensive option that I may want to replace to make sure that the deck functions in a very similar way. So I may want to test these 3, see how they do, and then choose one of those. Or some other card, because maybe Breakthrough Skill is going to be more relevant with Cosmo Dark Destroyer down to 1. Though personally, right now, I'm still wary of things like Magispector, so I probably won't be maining the breakthrough skills. But this is my brainstorming process here. I may consider the copies of Madolche Magellane to fill in the set, and the idea here would be this is a pretty defensive monster where you can just fetch copies of itself to keep having a spellcaster in hand, and when it dies in battle, it goes right back to your deck, absorbing 1400 damage due to its attack score. So you can just keep absorbing hits until you can draw out a second piece that you need to be able to make your Xyz summon. This would replace the 2 copies of Breaker that we're taking out, but it would also serve kind of a defensive role and allow me to survive. And it serves as kind of an extension of that core. Remember, the core doesn't necessarily have to stay exactly as it is. You can adjust it if you find certain new cards might be better against the metagame you are planning to play it against, or you could just adjust it by adding more cards to it if you feel that you can enhance it by playing something that you may not have needed to before in the previous environment. So these are just a couple different examples I have, but I encourage you guys go through and see what can I change here that would give me an advantage against the decks that I expect to play against. And then realistically at that point, the best you can do is actually go play test against those decks, see what works and what doesn't, and of course in the coming weeks we'll also have some more information as to the kinds of decks that are successful, and you'll be able to go about your ways as you normally do. But this is pretty much the process I go through for adjusting to a new list. A systematic way that kind of works as long as you focus on goals within your deck and just focusing on how is your core affected, how are your tech affected, and what do I need to do to fix what I have lost. So let me know down in the comments what you think of this series. If you have any other tips and tricks for how you like to adjust for a new list, I would love to hear those as well. I'm sure other guys would benefit if you have some awesome secrets. So thanks guys, this is JDGaming. Hope you guys enjoyed. The deck profile for this will be out whenever next week I have it all finalized. So I do apologize again for the delay, but I mean, it was at the end of the format. What can we do about it? We gotta test it out again, but I'm sure it'll be worth it. So thanks guys, once again, this is JDGaming. I'll see you guys next time.